Don't you start. Don't you start. Come on, come here. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Papa. My day has been busy. Today was a very busy Friday at work, which is good, but oh man, you guys are shedding all over the place. All right, oh, there we go. Me too. Need you to lay down, bud. Has everyone had a good Friday so far? I am well, Miss Susan. I hope you're well too. And I'm assuming so far everyone can hear me okay? Like give me a thumbs up or a star or something. Let me know if you can hear me all right. I just realized what shirt I'm wearing. This is not an appropriate shirt to wear for reading. I'm sorry. If there's any children watching right now, I'm sorry. Right, Hooby? It's not an appropriate shirt. That's okay. It's okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Hooby. Kitty, kitty, kitty. So as always, we're going to give this till about 8:05. Give people a chance to log on and get settled in. Aggravated with the governor. Yeah, Tennessee. Yeah. Among a few other states that are rather frustrating at the moment. Oh. $18 of you. My goodness. So far, oh, 16. That's okay. So far, everyone who's on at the moment, do we have any new people in the group? Do we have any, yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. I'm excited about book readings now. But do we have any new people in the group? Has anyone just joined us today for the reading? Or are you like Miss Deborah, who's been here from day one? Daniel, welcome. Have you read this book before? Are you familiar with the book? All the Light We Cannot See? Because that's what we're currently reading. And if you're just now joining us, we're just about halfway there. Actually now technically we are more than halfway through. So, hey Arkansas. Thank you so much. Well, for anyone who has maybe missed the other readings up until this point, I have actually started uploading all of these readings on my YouTube page. So you can find me at Mimi, which is MIMI _ SAYS _ HI. Mimi says hi _ in between each word. And my profile picture is so if you want to catch up, each of those readings are about about an hour and a half. And they're all in sequential order, so you don't have to worry about, figuring out which one's which. And they're labeled, so. Rosie, welcome, welcome. It's about 8:03. Got another minute or two. Does anyone have any exciting plans for the weekend? Susanna, welcome, welcome. Oh, happy birthday to your sister. That's exciting. Birthday parties are lots of fun. All right. Good evening, David. Okay. Can anyone hear the hum in the background? Because it's my AC unit. But if you guys can hear it and you don't care, that's one thing. But if it's loud and it's obnoxious, just let me know. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Well, it is 8:05, so we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. So here we go. At this point, we're at page 271. Moving herbs. Oh, dear. All right. So we're at page 271 at this point. No out. In January 1942, Werner goes to Dr. Hauptmann in his glowing, firelit office, twice as warm as the rest of the castle, and asks to be sent home. The little doctor is sitting behind his big desk with an anemic-looking roasted bird on a dish in front of him, quail or dove or grouse, rolls of schematics on his right. His hounds splay on the rug before the fire. Werner stands with his cap in his hands. Hauptmann shuts his eyes and runs a fingertip across one eyebrow. Werner says, "I will work to pay the train fare, sir." The blue fretwork of veins in Hauptmann's forehead pulsates. He opens his eyes. "You?" The dogs look up as one, a three-headed hydra. "You, who gets everything? Who comes here and listens to concerts and nibbles chocolates and warms yourself by the fire?" A shred of roasted bird dances on Hauptmann's cheek. Perhaps for the first time, Werner sees in his teacher's thinning blonde hair, in his black nostrils, in his small, almost elfin ears, something pitiless and inhuman, something determined only to survive. Perhaps you believe you are somebody now, somebody of importance? Werner clenches his cap behind his back to keep his shoulders from quaking. "No, sir." Hauptmann folds his napkin. "You are an orphan, Fenning, with no allies. I can make you whatever I want to make you. A troublemaker, a criminal, an adult. I can send you to the front and make sure you are crouched in a trench in the ice until the Russians cut off your hands and feed them to you." "Yes, sir." "You will be given your orders when the school is ready to give you your orders. No sooner. We serve the Reich, Fenning. It does not serve us." "Yes, sir." "You will come to the lab tonight, as usual." "Yes, sir." No more chocolates, no more special treatment. In the hall, with the door shut behind him, Werner presses his forehead against the wall, and a vision of his father's last moments comes to him. The crushing press of the tunnels, the ceiling lowering, jaw pinned against the floor, skull splintering. "I cannot go home," he thinks, "and I cannot stay." The disappearance of Harold Bazin. Marie Laure follows the odor of Madame Manec's soup through the place aux herbes and holds the warm pot outside the alcove behind the library while Madame raps on the door. Madame says, "Where's Monsieur Bazin?" "Must have moved on," says the librarian, though the doubt in his voice is only partially disguised. "Where could Harold Bazin move to?" "I'm not sure, Madame Manec. Please, it is cold." The door closes. Madame Manec swears. Marie Laure thinks of Harold Bazin's stories, lugubrious monsters made of sea foam, mermaids with fishy private parts, the romance of English sieges. "He'll be back," says Madame Manec, as much to herself as to Marie Laure. But the next morning Harold Bazin is not back, or the next. Only half the group attends the following meeting. "Do they think he was helping us?" whispers Madame Herbrod. "Was he helping us?" "I thought he was carrying messages." "What sort of messages?" "It's getting too dangerous." Madame Manec paces. Marie Laure can almost feel the heat of her frustration from across the room. "Leave, then," her voice smolders. "All of you." "Don't be rash," says Madame Ruelle. "We'll take a break. A week or two. Wait for things to settle." Harold Bazin, with his copper mask and boyish avidity, and his breath like crushed insects. Where, Marie Laure wonders, do they take people? The Gasthaus her father was taken to, where they write letters home about wonderful food and mythical trees. The baker's wife claims they're sent to camps in the mountains. The grocer's wife says they're sent to nylon factories in Russia. It seems as likely to Marie Laure that the people just disappear. The soldiers throw a bag over whomever they want to remove, run electricity through him, and then that person is gone, vanished, expelled to some other world. The city, thinks Marie Laure, is slowly being remade into the model upstairs. Streets sucked empty one by one. Each time she steps outside, she becomes aware of all the windows above her. The quiet is fretful and unnatural. It's what a mouse must feel, she thinks, as it steps from its hole into the open blades of a meadow, never knowing what shadow might come cruising above. Everything poisoned. New silk banners hang above the refectory tables, ablaze with slogans. They say, "Disgrace is not to fall, but to lie." They say, "Be slim and slender, as fast as a greyhound, as tough as leather, as hard as crooked steel." Every few weeks another instructor vanishes, sucked up into the engine of the war. New instructors, elderly townsmen of unreliable sobriety and disposition, are brought in. All of them, Werner notices, are in some way broken. They limp, or are blind in one eye, or their faces are lopsided from strokes or the previous war. The cadets show less respect to the new instructors, who in turn have shorter tempers, and soon the school feels to Werner like a grenade with its pin pulled. Strange things start happening with the electricity. It goes out for 15 minutes, and then surges. Clocks run fast, light bulbs brighten, flare and pop, and send a soft rain of glass falling into the corridors. Days of darkness ensue, the switches dead, the grid empty. The bunk rooms and showers become icy. For lighting, the caretaker resorts to torches and candles. All the gasoline is going to the war, and few cars come trundling through the school gates. Food is delivered by the same weathered mule, its ribs showing as it drags its cart. More than once, Werner slices the sausage on his plate to find pink worms squirming inside. The uniforms of the new cadets are stiffer and cheaper than his own. No longer do they have access to live ammunition for marksmanship. Werner would not be surprised if bastions started handing out rocks and sticks. And yet, all the news is good. "We are at the gates to the Caucasus," proclaims Hauptmann's radio. "We have taken oil fields. We will take Svalbard. We move with astounding speed. 5,700 Russians killed, 45 Germans lost." Every 6 or 7 days, the same 2 pallid casualty assistance officers enter the refectory, and 400 faces go ashen from the effort of not turning to watch. The boys move only their eyes, only their thoughts, tracking in their minds the passage of the 2 officers as they move between tables, seeking out the boy whose father has been killed. The cadet they stop behind often tries to pretend that he doesn't notice their presence. He puts his fork in his mouth and chews, and usually it is then that the officer, a sergeant, sets a hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy looks up at him with a full mouth and an unsteady face, and follows the officers out, and the big oak double doors creak shut, and the lunchroom slowly exhales and edges back to life. Reinhard Wohlmann's father falls. Karl Westerholzer's father falls. Martin Burkhardt's father falls, and Martin tells everybody, on the very same night his shoulder is tapped, that he is happy. Doesn't everything he says die at last and too soon? Who would not be honored to fall, to be a paving stone on the road to final victory? Werner looks for uneasiness in Martin's eyes, but cannot find it. For Werner, doubts turn up regularly. Racial purity, political purity. Bastian speaks to a horror of any sort of corruption, and yet Werner wonders in the dead of night, isn't life a kind of corruption? A child is born, and the world sets in upon it, taking things from it, stuffing things into it. Each bite of food, each particle of light entering the eye, the body can never be pure. But this is what the commandant insists upon, why the Reich measures their noses, clocks their hair color. The entropy of a closed system never decreases. At night, Werner stares up at Frederick's bunk. The thin slats, the miserable stained mattress. Another new boy sleeps up there. Dieter Ferdinand, a small, muscular kid from Frankfurt who does everything he is told with a terrifying ferocity. Someone coughs, someone else moans. A train sounds its lonesome whistle somewhere out beyond the lakes. To the east, always the trains move to the east. Beyond the rims of the hills, they go to the huge trodden borderlands of the front. Even as he sleeps, the trains are moving, the catapults of history rattling past. Werner laces his boots and sings the songs and marches the marches, acting less out of duty than out of a time-worn desire to be dutiful. Bastian walks the rows of boys at their dinners. What's worse than death, boys? Some poor cadet is called to attention. Cowardice! Cowardice, agrees Bastian, and the boy sits while the commandant slogs forward, nodding to himself, pleased. Lately the commandant speaks more and more intimately of the Fuhrer and the latest thing, prayers, petroleum, loyalty, that he requires. The Fuhrer requires trustworthiness, electricity, boot leather. Werner is beginning to see, approaching his 16th birthday, that what the Fuhrer really requires is boys. Great rows of them walking to the conveyor belt to climb on. Give up cream for the Fuhrer, sleep for the Fuhrer, aluminum for the Fuhrer. Give up Reinhard Wohlmann's father, and Karl Westerholzer's father, and Martin Burkhardt's father. In March 1942, Dr. Hauptmann calls Werner into his office. Half-packed crates litter the floor. The hounds are nowhere to be seen. The little man paces, and it is not until Werner announces himself that Hauptmann stops. He looks as if he is slowly being engulfed by something beyond his control. I have been called to Berlin. They want me to continue my work there. Hauptmann lifts an hourglass from a shelf and sets it in a crate, and his pale, silver-tipped fingers hang in the air. It will be as you dreamed, sir. The best equipment, the best minds. That is all, says Dr. Hauptmann. Werner steps into the hall. Out on the snow-dusted quad, 31st formers jog in place, their breaths showing in short-lived plumes. Chubby, slick-chinned, abominable Bastian yells something. He raises one short arm, and the boys turn on their heels, raise their rifles above their heads, and run faster in place, their knees flashing in the moonlight. Visitors. The electric bell rings at number 4 Rue Vaudreuil. Etienne Leblanc, Madame Manec, and Marie Laure stop chewing at the same time, each thinking, they have found me out. The transmitter in the attic, the women in the kitchen, the 100 trips to the beach. Etienne says, you are expecting someone? Madame Manec says, no one. The women would come to the kitchen door. The bell rings again. All three go to the foyer. Madame Manec opens the door. French policemen, 2 of them. They are there, they explain, at the request of the Natural History Museum in Paris. The jarring of their boot heels on the boards of the foyer seems loud enough to shatter the windows. The first one is eating something, an apple, Marie Laure decides. The second smells of shaving balm and roasted meat, as if they have been feasting. All 5, Etienne, Marie Laure, Madame Manec, and the 2 men sit in the kitchen around the square table. The men refuse a bowl of stew. The first clears his throat. Right or wrong, he says, he has been convicted of theft and conspiracy. All prisoners, political or otherwise, says the second, are forced to do labor, even if they have not been sentenced to it. The museum has written to wardens and prison directors all over Germany. We do not yet know exactly which prison. We believe it could be Breitenau. We're certain they did not hold a proper tribunal. Etienne's voice comes spiraling up from beside Marie Laure. Is that a good prison? I mean, one of the better ones? I'm afraid there are no good German prisons. A truck passes in the street. The sea folds into the Plage du Mollet, 50 yards away. She thinks they are just words. And what are words but sounds these men shape out of breath, weightless vapors they send into the air of the kitchen to dissipate and die. She says, "You have come all this way to tell us things we already know." Madame Manec takes her hand. Etienne murmurs, "We did not know about this place called Breitenau." The first policeman says, "You told the museum he has managed to smuggle out 2 letters?" The second, "May we see them?" Off goes Etienne, content to believe that someone is on the job. Marie Laure ought to be happy too, but something makes her suspicious. She remembers something her father said back in Paris on the first night of the invasion as they waited for a train. Everyone is looking out for himself. The first policeman snaps flesh off his apple with his teeth. Are they looking at her? To be so close to them makes her feel faint. Etienne returns with both letters, and she can hear the men passing the pages back and forth. Did he speak of anything before he left? Of any particular activities or errands we should be aware of? Their French is very good, very Parisian, but who knows where their loyalties lie? If your same blood doesn't run in the arms and legs of the person you're next to, you can't trust anything. Everything feels compressed and submarine to Marie Laure just then, as if the 5 of them have been submerged into a murky aquarium overfull of fish, and their fins keep bumping as they shift about. She says, "My father is not a thief." Madame Manec's hand squeezes hers. Etienne says, "He seemed concerned for his job, for his daughter, for France, of course, who wouldn't be?" "Mademoiselle," says the first man, he is talking directly to Marie Laure. "Was there no specific thing he mentioned?" "Nothing." "He had many keys at the museum. He turned in his keys before he left. May we look at whatever he brought here with him?" The second man adds, "His bags, perhaps." "He took his rucksack with him," says Marie Laure, "when the director asked him to return." "May we look anyway?" Marie Laure can feel the gravity in the room increase. What do they hope to find? She imagines the radio equipment high above her, microphone, transceiver, all of those dials and switches and cables. Etienne says, "You may." They go into every room, 3rd floor, 5th. On the 6th, they stand in her grandfather's old bedroom and open the huge wardrobe with its heavy doors, and cross the hall and stand over the model of Saint Malo in Marie Laure's room, and whisper to each other and then tromp back downstairs. They ask a total of 1 question, about three free French flags rolled up in a 2nd floor closet. Why does Etienne have them? "You put yourself in jeopardy keeping those," says the second policeman. "You would not want the authorities to think you were terrorists," says the first. "People have been accused and arrested for less." Whether this is offered as a favor or a threat remains unclear. Marie Laure thinks, do they mean Papa? The policemen finish their search and say good night with perfect politeness and leave. Madame Manec lights a cigarette. Marie Larrey's stew is cold. Etienne fumbles with the fireplace. He shoves the flags one after another into the fire. No more. No more. He says the second louder than the first. Not here. Madame Manec's voice. They found nothing. There is nothing to find. The acrid smell of burning cotton fills the kitchen. Her great-uncle says, You do what you like with your life, madame. You have always been there for me, and I will try to be there for you. But you may no longer do these things in this house, and you may not do them with my great niece. To my dear sister Yuta, it is very difficult now. Even paper is hard to redacted. We had redacted. No heat in the redacted. Frederick used to say there is no such thing as free will, and that every person's path is predetermined for him, just like redacted. And that is my mistake. That was what I redacted. So much redaction. I hope someday you can understand. Love to you, and Frau Elena too. Sig Heil. The Frog Cooks. In the weeks to come, Madame Manec is perfectly cordial. She walks with Marie Larrey to the beach most mornings, takes her to the market. But she seems absent, asking how Marie Larrey and Etienne are doing with perfect courtesy, saying good morning as if they are strangers. Often she disappears for half a day. Marie Larrey's afternoons become longer, lonelier. One evening she sits at the kitchen table while her great-uncle reads aloud. The vitality with which the snail's eggs possess surpass belief. We have seen certain species frozen in solid blocks of ice, and yet regain their activity when subjected to the influences of warmth. Etienne pauses. We should make supper. It doesn't appear that Madame will be back tonight. Neither of them moves. He reads another page. They have been kept for years in pill boxes, and yet, on subjecting them to moisture, have crawled about, appearing as well as ever. The shell may be broken, and even portions of it removed, and yet after a certain lapse of time, the injured parts will be repaired by a deposition of shelly matter at the fractured parts. There is hope for me yet, says Etienne, and laughs. And Marie Larrey is reminded that her great-uncle was not always so fearful, that he had a life before this war, and before the last one too, and that he was once a young man who dwelled in the world and loved it as she does. Eventually Madame Manec comes through the kitchen door and locks it behind her, and Etienne says good evening rather coldly, and after a moment Madame Manec says it back. Somewhere in the city, Germans are loading weapons or drinking brandy, and history has become nightmare from which Marie Larrey desperately wishes she could wake. Madame Manec takes a pot from the hanging rack and fills it with water. Her knife falls through what sounds like potatoes, the blade striking the wooden cutting board beneath. Please, madame, says Etienne, allow me. You are exhausted. But he does not get up, and Madame Manec keeps chopping potatoes, and when she is done, Marie Larrey hears her push a load of them into the water with the back of her knife. The tension in the room makes Marie Larrey feel dizzy, as if she can sense the planet rotating. Sink any U-boats today? Murmurs Etienne. Blow up any German tanks? Madame Manec snaps open the door of the icebox. Marie Larrey can hear her rummage through a drawer. A match flares, a cigarette lights. Soon enough, a bowl of undercooked potatoes appears before Marie Larrey. She feels around the tabletop for a fork, but finds none. Do you know what happens, Etienne, says Madame Manec from the other side of the kitchen, when you drop a frog in a pot of boiling water? You will tell us, I am sure. It jumps out. But do you know what happens when you put the frog in a pot of cool water, and then slowly bring it to a boil? You know what happens then? Marie Larrey waits. The potatoes steam. Madame Manec says, the frog cooks. Orders. Werner is summoned by an 11-year-old in full regalia to the commandant's office. He waits on a wooden bench in a slowly building panic. They must suspect something. Maybe they have discovered some fact about his parentage that even he doesn't know. Something ruinous. He remembers when the lance corporal came through the door of Children's House to escort him to Herr Seidler's. The certainty that the instruments of the Reich could see through walls, through skin, into the very soul of each subject. After several hours, the commandant's assistant calls him in and sets down his ballpoint, and looks across his desk as though Werner is one among a vast series of trivial problems he must put right. It has come to our attention, cadet, that your age has been recorded incorrectly. Sir? You are 18 years old, not 16, as you have claimed. Werner puzzles. The absurdity is plain. He remains smaller than most of the 14-year-olds. Our former technical sciences professor, Dr. Hauptmann, has called our attention to the discrepancy. He has arranged that you will be sent to a special technology division in the Wehrmacht. A division, sir? You have been here under false pretenses. His voice is oily and pleased. His chin is non-existent. Out a window, the school band practices a triumphal march. Werner watches a Nordic-looking boy stagger beneath the weight of a tuba. The commandant urged disciplinary action, but Dr. Hauptmann suggested that you would be eager to offer your skills to the Reich. From behind his desk, the assistant produces a folded uniform. Slate gray, eagle on the breast, Litzen on the collar, then a green-black coal-scuttle helmet, obviously too large. The band blares, then stops. The band instructor screams names. The commandant's assistant says, "You are very lucky, cadet. To serve is an honor." "When, sir?" "You'll receive instructions within a fortnight. That is all." Pneumonia. Breton spring, and a great onslaught of damp invades the coast. Fog on the sea, fog in the streets, fog in the mind. Madame Manec gets sick. When Marie Laure holds her hand over Madame's chest, she seems to steam up out of her sternum as though she cooks from the inside. Her breathing devolves into trains of oceanic coughs. "I watch the sardines," murmurs Madame, "and the termites, and the crows." Etienne summons a doctor who prescribes rest, aspirin, and aromatic violet comfits. Marie Laure sits with Madame through the worst of it, strange hours when the old woman's hands go very cold, and she talks about being in charge of the world. She is in charge of everything, but no one knows. It is a tremendous burden, she says, to be responsible for every little thing, every infant born, every leaf falling from every tree, every wave that breaks onto the beach, every ant on its journey. Deep in Madame's voice, Marie Laure hears water, atolls and archipelagos and lagoons and fjords. Etienne proves to be a tender nurse. Washcloths, broth, now and then a page from Pasteur or Rousseau. His manner forgiving her all transgressions past and present. He wraps Madame in quilts, but eventually she shivers so deeply, so profoundly, that he takes the big heavy rag rug off the floor and lays it on top of her. "Dearest Marie Laure, your parcels arrived, 2 of them, dated months apart. Joy is not a strong enough word. They let me keep the toothbrush and comb, though not the paper they were wrapped in, nor the soap. How I wish they would let us have soap. They said our next reposting would be to a chocolate factory, but it was cardboard. All day we manufacture cardboard. What do they do with so much? All my life, Marie Laure, I have been the one carrying the keys. Now I hear them jangling in the mornings when they come for us, and every time I reach in my own pocket, only to find it empty. When I dream I am in the museum. Remember your birthdays? How there were always 2 things on the table when you woke? I am sorry it turned out like this. If you ever wish to understand, look inside Etienne's house. Inside the house. I know you will do the right thing, though I wish the gift were better. My angel is leaving, so if I can get this to you, I will. I do not worry about you because I know you are very smart in keeping yourself safe. I am safe too, so you should not worry. Thank Etienne for reading this to you. Thank in your heart the brave soul who carries this letter away from me and on its way to you. Your Papa. Treatments. Von Rumpel's doctor says that fascinating research is being done on mustard gases. The anti-tumor properties of any number of chemicals are being explored. The prognosis is looking up. In test subjects, lymphoid tumors have been seen to reduce in size, but the injections make von Rumpel dizzy and weak. In the days following, he can hardly manage to comb his hair or convince his fingers to button his coat. His mind plays tricks too. He walks into a room and forgets why he's there. He stares at a superior and forgets what the man just said. The sounds of passing cars are like the tines of forks dragged along his nerves. Tonight he wraps himself in hotel blankets and orders soup and unwraps a bundle from Vienna. The mousy brown librarian has sent copies of the Tavernier and the Streeter, and even, most remarkably, stenciled duplicates of De Boot's 1604, Gemmarum et Lapidum Historia, written entirely in Latin. Everything she could find concerning the Sea of Flames, 9 paragraphs total. It takes all his concentration to bring the texts into focus. A goddess of the earth who fell in love with a god of the sea. A prince who recovered from catastrophic injuries, who ruled from within a blur of light. Von Rumpel closes his eyes and sees a flame-haired goddess charge through the tunnels of the earth, drops of flame glowing in her wake. He hears a priest with no tongue say, "The keeper of the stone will live forever." He hears his father say, "See obstacles as opportunities, Reinhold. See obstacles as inspirations." Heaven. For a few weeks, Madame Manec gets better. She promises Etienne she will remember her age, not to try to be everything to everyone, not to fight the war by herself. One day in early June, almost exactly 2 years after the invasion of France, she and Marie Laure walk through a field of Queen Anne's lace east of St. Malo. Madame Manec told Etienne that they were going to see if strawberries were available at the St. Servan market, but Marie Laure is certain that when they stopped to greet a woman on the way here, Madame dropped off one envelope and picked up another. At Madame's suggestion, they lie down in the weeds, and Marie Laure listens to honeybees mine the flowers and tries to imagine their journeys as Etienne described them, each worker following a rivulet of odor, looking for ultraviolet patterns in the flowers, filling baskets on her hind legs with pollen grains, then navigating, drunk and heavy, all the way back home. How do they know what parts to play, those little bees? Madame Manec takes off her shoes and lights a cigarette, and lets out a contented groan. Insects drone, wasps, hoverflies, a passing dragonfly. Etienne has taught Marie Laure to distinguish each by its sound. What's a Roneo machine, Madame? Something to help make pamphlets. What does it have to do with that woman we met? Nothing to trouble yourself over, dear. Horses nicker. The wind comes from the sea, gentle and cool and full of smells. Madame, what do I look like? You have many thousands of freckles. Papa used to say they were like stars in heaven, like apples in a tree. They are little brown dots, child, thousands of little brown dots. That sounds ugly. On you they are beautiful. Do you think, Madame, that in heaven we will really get to see God face to face? We might. What if you're blind? I'd expect that if God wants us to see something, we'll see it. Uncle Etienne says heaven is like a blanket babies cling to. He says people have flown airplanes 10 kilometers above the earth and found no kingdoms there, no gates, no angels. Madame Manec cracks off a ragged chain of coughs that sends tremors of fear through Marie Laure. You are thinking of your father, she finally says. You have to believe your father will return. Don't you ever get tired of believing, Madame? Don't you ever want proof? Madame Manec rests a hand on Marie Laure's forehead, the thick hand that first reminded her of a gardener's or a geologist's. You must never stop believing. That's the most important thing. The Queen Anne's lace sways on its trap roots. and the bees do their steady work. If only life were like a Jules Verne novel, thinks Marie-Laure, you could page ahead when you most needed to and learn what would happen. Madame? Yes, Marie. What do you think they eat in heaven? I'm not so sure they need to eat in heaven. Not eat? You would not like that, would you? But Madame Manette does not laugh the way Marie-Laure expects her to. She doesn't say anything at all. Her breath clatters in and out. Did I offend you, Madame? No, child. Are we in danger? No more than any other day. The grasses toss and shimmy. The horses nicker. Madame Manette says, almost whispering, Now that I think about it, child, I expect heaven is a lot like this. Frederick. Werner spends the last of his money on train fare. The afternoon is bright enough, but Berlin seems to not want to accept the sunlight, as though its buildings have become gloomier and dirtier and more splotchy in the months since he last visited, though perhaps what has changed are the eyes that see it. Rather than ring the bell right away, Werner laps the block 3 times. The apartment windows are uniformly dark, whether unlit or blacked out, he cannot tell. At a certain point on each circuit, he passes a storefront filled with undressed mannequins, and though he knows each time that it is merely a trick of the light, he cannot stop his eyes from seeing them as corpses strung up by wires. Finally, he rings the bell for number 2. No one buzzes down, and he notices from the nameplates that they are no longer in number 2. Their name is on number 5. He rings. A returning buzz issues from inside. The lift is out of order, so he walks up. The door opens. Fanny, with the downy face and swinging flaps of skin under her arms, she gives him a look that one trapped person gives another. Then Frederick's mother swishes out from a side room wearing tennis shoes. Why, Werner! She loses herself momentarily in troubled reverie, surrounded by sleek furniture, some of it wrapped in thick wool blankets. Does she blame him? Does she think he is partially responsible? Perhaps he is. But then she comes awake and kisses him on both cheeks, and her bottom lip quivers lightly, as if his materialization is preventing her from keeping certain shadows at bay. He won't know you. Don't try to make him remember. It will only upset him. But you are here. I suppose that's something. I was about to go. Very sorry I cannot stay. Show him in, Fanny. The maid leads him into a grand drawing room, its ceilings a swirl with plaster flourishes, its walls painted a delicate eggshell blue. No paintings have been hung yet, and the shelves wait empty and cardboard boxes stand open on the floor. Frederick sits at a glass-topped table at the back of the room, both table and boy looking small amid the clutter. His hair has been combed hard to one side, and his loose cotton shirt has bunched up behind his shoulders, so that his collar is skewed. His eyes do not rise to meet his visitors. He wears his same old black-framed glasses. Someone has been feeding him, and the spoon rests on the glass table, and blobs of porridge cling to Frederick's whiskers as his placemat, which is a woolen thing featuring happy pink-cheeked children in clogs. Werner cannot look at it. Fanny bends and pushes 3 more spoonfuls into Frederick's mouth and wipes his chin, folds up his placemat, and walks through a swinging door into what must be a kitchen. Werner stands with his hands crossed in front of his belt. 1 year. More than that. Frederick has to shave now, Werner realizes, or someone has to shave him. Hello, Frederick. Frederick rolls his head back and looks toward Werner through his smudged lenses down the line of his nose. I'm Werner. Your mother said you might not remember? I'm your friend from school. Frederick seems not so much to be looking at Werner as through him. On the table is a stack of paper, on top of which is a thick and clumsy spiral, has been drawn by a heavy hand. Did you make this? Werner lifts the topmost drawing. Beneath that page is another, then another, 30 or 40 spirals, each taking up a whole sheet, all in the same severe lead. Frederick drops his chin to his chest, probably a nod. Werner glances around. A trunk, a box of linens, the pale blue of the walls, and the rich white of the wainscot. Late sunlight glides through the tall French windows, and the air tastes of silver polish. This fifth-floor apartment is indeed nicer than the second-floor one. The ceiling's high and decorated with punched tin and stucco flourishes, fruits, flowers, banana leaves. Frederick's lip is curled and his upper teeth show, and a string of drool swings from his chin and touches the paper. Werner, unable to bear it a second longer, calls for the maid. Fanny peeks out of the swinging door. Where, he asks, is that book? The one with the birds, in the gold slipcover. I don't think we ever had a book like that. No, you did. Fanny only shakes her head and laces her fingers across her apron. Werner lifts the flaps of boxes, peering in. Surely it's around here. Frederick has begun to draw a new spiral on a blank sheet. Maybe in this? Fanny stands beside Werner and plucks his wrist off the crate he is about to open. I do not think, she repeats, we ever had a book like that. Werner's whole body has started to itch. Out the huge windows, the lindens toss back and forth. The light fades. An unlit sign atop a building 2 blocks away reads, Berlin smokes Junos. Fanny has already retreated back into the kitchen. Werner watches Frederick create another crude spiral, the pencil locked in his fist. I'm leading Schulpforte, Frederick. They're changing my age and sending me to the front. Frederick lifts the pencil, studying, and then reapplies it. Less than a week. Frederick works his mouth as if to chew air. You look pretty, he says. He does not look directly at Werner, and his words are close to moans. You look pretty, very pretty, Mama. I'm not your Mama, hisses Werner. Come on, now. Frederick's expression is entirely without artifice. Somewhere in the kitchen, the maid is listening. There is no other sound, not of traffic, or airplanes, or trains, or radios, or the specter of Frau Schwarzenberger rattling the cage of the elevator. No chanting, no singing, no silk banners, no bands, no trumpets, no mother, no father, no slick-fingered commandant dragging a finger across his back. The city seems utterly still, as though everyone is listening, waiting for someone to slip. Werner looks at the blue of the walls and thinks of birds of America. Yellow-crowned heron, Kentucky warbler, scarlet tanager, bird after glorious bird, and Frederick's gaze remains stuck in some terrible middle ground, each eye a stagnant pool into which Werner cannot bear to look. Relapse. Hello, Chris, watching from Mississippi. In late June 1942, for the first time since her fever, Madame Manec is not in the kitchen when Marie Laure wakes. Could she already be at the market? Marie Laure taps on her door, waits 100 heartbeats. She opens the rear door and calls into the alley. Glorious, warm June dawn. Pigeons and cats. Screech of laughter from a neighboring window. Madame? Her heart accelerates. She taps again on Madame Manec's door. Madame? Hello. When she lets herself in, she hears the rattle first, as though a weary tide stirs stones in the old woman's lungs. Sour odors of sweat and urine rise from the bed. Her hands find Madame's face, and the old woman's cheek is so hot that Marie Laure's fingers recoil as though scalded. She scrambles upstairs, stumbling, shouting, "Uncle! Uncle!" The whole house turning scarlet in her mind, roof turning to smoke, flames chewing through walls. Etienne crouches on his popping knees beside Madame, then scurries to the telephone and speaks a few words. He returns to Madame Manec's bedside at a trot. Over the next hour the kitchen fills with women. Madame Ruel, Madame Fontenot, Madame Herbrod. The first floor becomes too crowded, and Marie Laure paces the staircase, up and down, as though working her way up and down the spire of an enormous seashell. The doctor comes and goes. The occasional woman closes her bony hand around Marie Laurey's shoulders, and at exactly 2 o'clock, by the bonging of the cathedral bells, the doctor returns with a man who says nothing beyond good afternoon, who smells of dirt and clover, who lifts Madame Manec and carries her out into the street and sets her on a horse cart as though she is a bag of milled oats, and the horse's shoes clop away, and the doctor strips the bed sheets, and Marie Laurey finds Etienne in the corner of the kitchen whispering, "Madame is dead. Madame is dead." August 8th, 1944. Someone in the house. A presence. An inhalation. Marie Laurey trains all of her senses on the entryway 3 flights below. The outer gate sighs shut, and then the front door closes. In her head, her father reasons, the gate closed before the door, not after. Which means whoever it is, he closed the gate first, then shut the door. He's inside. All the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Etienne knows he would have triggered the bell, Marie. Etienne would be calling for you already. Boots in the foyer, fragments of dishes crunching underfoot. It is not Etienne. The distress is so acute it is almost unbearable. She tries to settle her mind, to focus on an image of a candle flame burning at the center of her rib cage, a snail drawn up into the coils of its shell. But her heart bangs in her chest, and pulses of fear cycle up her spine, and she is suddenly uncertain whether a sighted person in the foyer can look up the curves of the stairwell and see all the way to the 3rd floor. She remembers her great-uncle said that they would need to watch out for looters, that the air stirs with phantom blurs and rustles, and Marie Laurey imagines charging past the bathroom into the cobwebbed bathroom here on the 3rd floor and hurling herself out the window. Boots in the hall, the slide of a dish across the floor as it is kicked. A fireman, a neighbor, some German soldier hunting food. A rescuer would be calling for survivors, ma chérie. You have to move. You have to hide. The footfalls travel toward Madame Manec's room. They go slowly. Maybe it's dark. Could it already be night? 4 or 5 or 6 or 1,000,000 heartbeats all roll by. She has her cane, Etienne's coat, the 2 cans, the knife, and the brick. Model house in her dress pocket. The stone inside that. Water in the tub at the end of the hall. Move. Go. A pot or pan, presumably knocked off its hook in the bombing, wobbles on the kitchen tiles. He exits the kitchen, returns to the foyer. Stand, ma chérie, stand up now. She stands. With her right hand she finds the railing. He is at the base of the stairs. She almost cries out, but then she recognizes, just as he sets his foot on the first stair, that his stride is out of rhythm. 1, pause 2, 1, pause 2. It is a walk she has heard before. The limp of a German sergeant major with a dead voice. Go. Marie Laurey takes each step as deliberately as she can, grateful now that she does not have her shoes. Her heart knocks so furiously against the cage of her chest that she feels certain the man below will hear it. Up to the 4th floor. Each step is a whisper. The 5th. On the 6th floor landing, she pauses beneath the chandelier and tries to listen. She hears the German climb 3 or 4 more stairs and take a brief, asthmatic pause. Then on again. A wooden step complains beneath his weight. It sounds to her like a small animal being crushed. He stops on what she believes is the 3rd floor landing, where she was just sitting, her warmth still there on the wood floor beside the telephone cable, her dissipated breath. Where does she have left to run? Hide. To her left waits her grandfather's old room. To her right waits her little bedroom, the window glass blown out. Straight ahead is the toilet, still the faint reek of smoke everywhere. His footfalls cross the landing. 1, pause 2, 1, pause 2. Wheezing, climbing again. Hey, from Virginia, hello. If he touches me, she thinks, I will tear out his eyes. She opens the door to her grandfather's bedroom and stops. Below her, the man pauses again. Has he heard her? Is he climbing more quietly? Out in the world waits a multitude of sanctuaries, gardens full of bright green wind, kingdoms of hedges, deep pools of forest shade through which butterflies float, thinking only of nectar. She can get to none of them. She finds the huge wardrobe at the end of Henri's room, and opens the 2 mirrored doors and parts the old shirts hanging inside, and slides open the false door Etienne has built into its back. She squeezes into the tiny space where the ladder rises to the garret. Then she reaches back through the wardrobe, finds its doors, and closes them. Protect me now, Stone, if you are a protector. Silently, says the voice of her father. Make no noise. With one hand she finds the handle Etienne has rigged onto the false panel on the back of the wardrobe. She glides it shut, 1 centimeter at a time, until she hears it click into place, then takes a breath and holds it for as long as she can. Oh, say hello to your wife for me. The Death of Walter Bernd. For an hour, Bernd murmured gibberish. Then he went silent, and Volkheimer said, God, have mercy on your servant. But now Bernd sits up and calls for light. They feed him the last of the water in the first canteen. A single thread of it runs down through his whiskers, and Werner watches it go. Bernd sits in the glimmer of the field light and looks from Volkheimer to Werner. On leave last year, he says, I visited my father. He was old. He was old all my life. But now he seemed especially old. It took him forever just to cross his kitchen. He had a package of cookies, little almond cookies. He put them out on a plate, just the package lying crosswise. Neither of us ate any. He said, You don't have to stay. I'd like you to stay, but you don't have to. You probably have things to do. You can go off with your friends if you want to. He kept saying that. Volkheimer switches off the light, and Werner apprehends something excruciating held at bay there in the darkness. I left, said Bernd. I went down the stairs and into the street. I had nowhere to go, nobody to see. I didn't have any friends in that town. I had ridden trains all goddamn day to see him, but I left, just like that. Then he's quiet. Volkheimer repositions him on the floor with Werner's blanket over him, and not long afterward, Bernd dies. Werner works on the radio. Maybe he does it for Jutta, as Volkheimer suggested, or maybe he does it so he does not have to think about Volkheimer carrying Bernd into a corner and piling bricks onto his hands, his chest, his face. Werner holds the field light in his mouth and gathers what he can. A small hammer, 3 jars of screws, 18-gauge line cord from a shattered desk lamp. Inside a warped cabinet drawer, miraculously, he discovers a zinc-carbon 11-volt battery with a black cat printed on the side. An American battery, its slogan offering 9 lives. Werner spotlights it in the flickering orange glow, amazed. He checks its terminals, still plenty of charge. When the field light battery dies, he thinks, we'll have this. He rights the capsized table, sets the crushed transceiver on top. Werner does not yet believe there is much promise in it, but maybe it's enough to give the mind something to do, a problem to solve. He adjusts Volkheimer's light in his teeth, tries not to think about hunger or thirst. He stopped the stoppered void in his left ear, Bernd in the corner, the Austrians upstairs, Frederick, Frau Elena, Jutta, any of it. Antenna, tuner, capacitor. His mind, while he works, is almost quiet, almost calm. This is an act of memory. 6th floor bedroom. Von Rumpel limps through the rooms with their faded white moldings and ancient kerosene lamps and embroidered curtains and Belle Epoque mirrors and ships and glass bottles and push-button electrical switches, all dead. Faint twilight angles through smoke and shutter slats in hazy red stripes. Temple to the Second Empire, this house. A bathtub 3/4 full of cold water on the 3rd floor. Deeply cluttered rooms on the 4th. No dollhouses yet. He climbs to the 5th floor, sweating. Worrying he got everything wrong. The weight in his gut swings pendulously. There's a large ornate room crammed with trinkets and crates and books and mechanical parts. A desk, a bed, a divan. 3 windows on each side. No model. To the 6th floor. On the left, a tidy bedroom with a single window and long curtains. A boy's cap hangs on the wall. At the back looms a massive wardrobe, mothballed shirts hung inside. Back to the landing. Here's a little water closet. The toilet full of urine. Beyond it, a final bedroom. Seashells are lined along every available surface. Shells on the sills and on the dresser, and jars full of pebbles lined up on the floor, all arranged by some indiscernible system. And here, on a low table at the foot of the bed, sits what he has been searching for, a wooden model of the city, nestled like a gift, as big as a dining table, brimming with tiny houses. Except for flakes of plaster in its streets, the little city is entirely undamaged. The simulacrum now more whole than the original, a work of clear magnificence. In the daughter's room, for her, of course. Von Rumpel feels as if he has come triumphantly to the end of a long journey, and as he sits on the edge of the bed, twin flares of pain riding up from his groin, he has the curious sensation of having been here before, of having lived in a room like this, slept in a lumpy bed like this, collected polished stones and arrayed them just like this, as though somehow this whole set has been waiting for his return. He thinks of his own daughters, how much they would love to see a city on a table. His youngest would want him to kneel beside her. "Let's imagine all the people having their supper," she'd say. "Let's imagine us, Papa." Outside the broken window, outside the latched shutters, St. Malo is so quiet that Von Rumpel can hear the rustle of his own heartbeat, shifting hairs in his inner ear. Smoke blowing over the roof, ash falling lightly. Any moment the guns will start again. Gently now. It will be in here somewhere. It is like the locksmith to repeat himself. The model. It will be inside the model. All readings on YouTube. Actually, technically I am doing readings on YouTube. If you have missed the previous readings from reading our book, I have actually uploaded them onto my YouTube page. So you can actually listen to me on YouTube while you guys nod off into La La Land. If you go to my bio here in TikTok, you'll see the little Instagram camera. Hit that icon and it'll take you to my YouTube, the YouTube name, and you'll find my page right away. Making the radio. One end of wire Werner crimps around a shorn pipe standing diagonally up from the floor. With spit, he wipes clean the length of the wire and coils it 100 times around the base of the pipe, making a new tuning coil. The other end he slings through a bent strut wedged into the congestion of timber, stone, and plaster that has become their ceiling. Volkheimer watches from the shadows. A mortar shell explodes somewhere in the city. A flurry of dust sifts down. The diode goes between free ends of the 2 wires and meets the leads of the battery to complete the circuit. Werner runs the beam of Volkheimer's light over the entire operation. Ground, antenna, battery. Finally, he braces the flashlight between his teeth and raises the twin leads of the earphone in front of his eyes and strips them against the threads of a screw and touches the naked ends to the diode. Invisibly, electrons bumble down the wires. The hotel above them, what is left of it, makes a series of unearthly groans. Timbers splinter, as though the rubble teeters on some final fulcrum, as though a single dragonfly could alight on it and trigger an avalanche that will bury them for good. Werner presses the bud of the earphone to his right ear. It does not work. He turns over the dented radio case and peers into it. Wraps Volkheimer's fading light back to life. Settle the mind. Envision the distribution of current. He rechecks the fuses, valves, plug pins. He toggles the receive-send switch, blows dust off the meter selector, replaces the leads to the battery, tries the earphone again. And there it is, as if he is 8 years old again, crouched beside his sister on the floor of Children's House. Static, rich and steady. In his memory, Yuta says his name, and on its tail comes a second, less expected image. Twin ropes strung from the front of Herr Sabler's house, the great smooth crimson banner hanging from them, unsoiled and deeply red. Werner scans frequencies by feel. No squelch, no snap of Morse code, no voices. Static, 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 static. In his functioning ear, in the radio, in the air. Volkheimer's eyes stay on him. Dust floats through the feeble beam of the flashlight. 10,000 particles, turning softly, twinkling. In the attic. The German shuts the wardrobe doors and hobbles away, and Marie Laure stays on the bottom rung of the ladder for a count of 40, 60, 100. The heart scrambling to deliver oxygenated blood, the mind scrambling to unravel the situation. A sentence Etienne once read aloud returns. Even the heart, which in higher animals, when agitated, pulsates with increased energy, in the snail, under similar excitement, throbs with a slower motion. Slow the heart. Flex your feet. Make no sound. She presses her ear to the false panel on the back of the wardrobe. What does she hear? Moths gnawing away at her grandfather's ancient smocks? Nothing. Slowly, impossibly, Marie Laure finds herself growing sleepy. She feels for the cans in her pockets. How to open one now, without making noise? Only thing to do is climb. 7 rungs up into the long triangular tunnel of the garret. The raw timbered ceiling rises on both sides toward the peak, just higher than the top of her head. Heat has lodged itself up here. No window, no exit. Nowhere else to run. No way out except the way she has come. Her outstretched fingers find an old shaving bowl, an umbrella stand, and a crate full of who knows what. The attic floorboards beneath her feet are as wide across as her hands. She knows from experience how much noise a person walking on them makes. Don't knock anything over. If the German opens the wardrobe again and yanks aside the hanging clothes and squeezes through the door and climbs up into the attic, what will she do? Knock him on the head with the umbrella stand? Jab him with the paring knife? Scream? Die? Papa. She crawls along the center beam, from which the narrow planks of floor emanate, toward the stone bulk of the chimney at the far end. The center beam is thickest and will be quieter. She hopes she has not become disoriented. She hopes he is not behind her, leveling a pistol at her back. Bats cry almost inaudibly out the attic vent and somewhere far away, on a naval ship perhaps, or out past Paramé, a heavy gun fires. Crack! Pause. Crack! Pause. Then the long scream as the shell comes flying in, the thump as it explodes on an outer island. A ghastly creeping terror rises from a place beyond thoughts. Some innermost trapdoor she must leap upon immediately and lean against with all her weight and padlock shut. She takes off the coat and spreads it across the floor. She dares not pull herself up for fear of the noise her knees will make on the boards. Time passes. Nothing from downstairs. Could he have gone so quickly? Of course he is not gone. She knows, after all, why he is here. To her left, several electrical cords wind along the floor. Just ahead is Etienne's box of old records, his wind-up Victrola, his old recording machine, the lever he uses to hoist the aerial alongside the chimney. She hugs her knees to her chest and tries to breathe through her skin, soundlessly, like a snail. She has the 2 cans, the brick, the knife. August 1942. Prisoners. A dangerously underweight corporal in threadbare fatigues comes for Werner on foot, long fingers, a thatch of thinning hair beneath his cap. One of his boots has lost its lace, and its tongue lolls cannibalistically. He says, "You're little." Werner, in his new field tunic and oversized helmet and regulation Gott mit uns belt buckle, draws his shoulders back. The man squints at the huge school in the dawn, then bends and unzips Werner's duffel and rifles through the 3 carefully folded NPEA uniforms. He raises a pair of trousers against the light and seems disappointed that they are not remotely his size. After he closes the bag, he throws it over his shoulder. Whether to keep it or merely carry it, Werner cannot guess. "I'm Newman. They call me 2. There's another Newman. The driver, he's 1. Then there's the engineer and the sergeant and you, so for whatever it's worth, that's 5 again." No trumpets, no ceremony. This is Werner's induction into the Wehrmacht. They walk the 3 miles from the school to the village. In a delicatessen, black flies swim over a half-dozen tables. Newman, too, orders 2 plates of calf's liver and eats both, using dark little bread rolls to sop the blood. His lips shine. Werner waits for explanations, where they're going, what sort of unit he'll be joining, but none are forthcoming. The color of the arms displayed under the corporal's shoulders and shoulder straps and collar tabs is wine red, but Werner can't remember what that is supposed to signify. Armored infantry? Chemical warfare? The old Frau collects the plates. Newman, too, removes a small tin from his coat, dumps 3 round pills on the table and gulps them down. Then he puts the tin back inside his coat and looks at Werner. "Backache pills. You have money?" Werner shakes his head. From a pocket, Newman, too, pulls some crumpled and filthy Reichsmarks. Before they leave, he asks the Frau to bring a dozen hard-boiled eggs and hands Werner 4. From Schopforta they'd ride a train through Leipzig and disembark at a switching station west of Lodz. Soldiers from an infantry battalion lie along the platform, all of them asleep, as though some enchantress cast a spell over them. Their faded uniforms look spectral in the dimness, and their breathing seems synchronized, and the effect is ghostly and unnerving. Now and then a loudspeaker mutters destinations Werner has never heard of. Grimma, Wurzen, Grossenschein, though no trains come or go, and the men do not stir. Newman, too, sits with his legs spread and eats eggs one after another, piling the shells into a tower inside his upturned cap. Dusk falls. A soft, tidal snoring issues from the sleeping company. Werner feels as though he and Newman, too, are the only souls awake in the entire world. Well after dark, a whistle sounds in the east, and the drowsing soldiers stir. Werner comes out of a half-dream and sits up. Newman, too, is already upright beside him, palms cupped against each other, as though attempting to hold a sphere of darkness in the bowl of his hands. Couplings rattle, brake locks grind against wheels, and a train emerges from the gloom, moving fast. First comes a blacked-out locomotive, bolted over with armor, exhaling a thick geyser of smoke and steam. Behind the locomotive rumble a few closed cars, and then a machine gun in a blister, 2 gunners crouching beside it. All of the cars following the gunner's car are flat cars loaded with people. Some stand, more kneel. Two cars pass, 3, 4. Each car appears to have a wall of sacks along the front to serve as a windbreak. The rails below the platform shine dully as they bounce beneath the weight. 9 flat cars, 10, 11, all full. The sacks, as they pass, seem strange. They look as though they've been sculpted out of gray clay. Newman, too, raises a chin. Prisoners. Werner tries to pick out individuals as the cars blur past. A sunken cheek, a shoulder, a glittering eye. Are they wearing uniforms? Many sit with their backs against the sacks at the front of the car. They look like scarecrows shipping west to be staked in some terrible garden. Some of the prisoners Werner sees are sleeping. A face flashes past, pale and waxy, one ear pressed to the floor of the car. Werner blinks. Those are not sacks. That is not sleep. Each car has a wall of corpses stacked in the front. Once it becomes clear that the train will not stop, all the soldiers around them settle and close their eyes once more. Newman, too, yawns. Car after car the prisoners come, a river of human beings pouring out of the night. 16, 17, 18. Why count? Hundreds and hundreds of them, thousands. Eventually from the darkness rushes a final flat car, where again the living recline on the dead, followed by the shadow of another gun in a blister, and 4 or 5 gunners, and then the train is gone. The sound of the axles fades. Silence seals itself back over the forest. Somewhere in that direction is Schulpforta, with its dark spires, its bedwetters, the sleepwalkers and bullies. Somewhere beyond the groaning Leviathan is Zollverein, the rattling windows of Children's House, and Jutta. Werner says, "They were sitting on their dead?" Newman, too, closes an eye and cocks his head like a rifleman aiming into the darkness where the train has receded. "Bang," he says. "Bang, bang." The Wardrobe. In the days following the death of Madame Manec, Etienne does not come out of his study. Marie Laure imagines him hunched on the davenport, mumbling children's rhymes and watching ghosts shuttle through the walls. Behind the door, his silence is so complete that she worries he has managed to depart the world altogether. "Uncle? Etienne?" Madame Blanchard walks Marie Laure to St. Vincent's for Madame Manec's memorial. Madame Fontenot cooks enough potato soup to last a week. Madame Gibault brings jam. Madame Ruelle, somehow, has baked a crumb cake. Hours wear out and fall away. Marie Laure sets a full plate outside Etienne's door at night and collects an empty plate in the morning. She stands alone in Madame Manec's room and smells peppermint, candle wax, 6 decades of loyalty. Housemaid, nurse, mother, confederate, counselor, chef. What 10,000 things was Madame Manec to Etienne, to them all. German sailors sing a drunken song in the street, and a house spider over the stove spins a new web every night. And to Marie Laure, this is a double cruelty, that everything else keeps living, that the spinning earth does not pause for even an instant in its trip around the sun. Poor child, poor Monsieur Leblanc. It's like they're cursed. If only her father would come through the kitchen door, smile at the ladies, set his palms on Marie Laure's cheeks. 5 minutes with him. 1 minute. After 4 days, Etienne comes out of his room. The stairs creak as he descends, and the women in the kitchen fall silent. In a grave voice, he asks everyone to please leave. "I needed time to say goodbye, and now I must look after myself and my niece. Thank you." As soon as the kitchen door has closed, he turns the deadbolts and takes Marie Laure's hands. "All the lights are off now. Very good. Please, stand over here." Chairs slide away. The kitchen table slides away. She can hear him fumbling at the ring in the center of the floor. The trap door comes up. He goes down into the cellar. "Uncle, what do you need?" "This," he calls. "What is it?" "An electric saw." She can feel something bright kindle in her abdomen. Etienne starts up the stairs, Marie Laure trailing behind. 2nd floor, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. She turns left into her grandfather's room. He opens the doors of the gigantic wardrobe, lifts out his brother's old clothes, and places them on the bed. He runs an extension cord out to the landing and plugs it in. He says, "It will be loud." She says, "Good." Etienne climbs into the back of the wardrobe, and the saw yowls to life. The sound permeates the walls, the floor, Marie Laure's chest. She wonders how many neighbors hear it, if somewhere a German at his breakfast has cocked his head to listen. Etienne removes a rectangle from the back of the wardrobe, then cuts through the attic door behind it. He shuts down the saw and wriggles through the raw hole up the ladder behind it and into the garret. She follows. All morning Etienne crawls along the attic floor, with cables and pliers and tools her fingers do not understand. weaving himself into the center of what she imagines as an intricate electronic net. He murmurs to himself. He fetches thick booklets or electrical components from various rooms on the lower stories. The attic creaks. Houseflies draw electric blue loops in the air. Late in the evening, Marie Laure descends the ladder and falls asleep in her grandfather's bed to the sound of her great-uncle working above her. When she wakes, barn swallows are chirring beneath the eaves and music is raining down through the ceiling. Clair de Lune, a song that makes her think of leaves fluttering and of the hard ribbons of sand beneath her feet at low tide. The music slinks and rises and settles back to earth, and then the young voice of her long-dead grandfather speaks. There are 96,000 kilometers of blood vessels in the human body, children, almost enough to wind around the earth 2.5 times. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Etienne comes down the 7 ladder rungs and squeezes through the back of the wardrobe and takes her hands in his. Before he speaks, she knows what he will say. Your father asked me to keep you safe. I know. This will be dangerous. It is not a game. I want to do it. Madame would want... Tell it to me. Tell me the whole routine. 22 paces down the Rue Vaudreuil to the Rue des Tres. Then right for 16 storm drains. Left on the Rue Robert-Surcouf. 9 more storm drains to the bakery. I go to the counter and say, 1 ordinary loaf, please. How will she reply? She will be surprised, but I am supposed to say 1 ordinary loaf. And she is supposed to say, and how is your uncle? She will ask about me. She's supposed to. That's how she will know that you are willing to help. It's what Madame suggested, part of the protocol. And you will say? I will say, my uncle is well, thank you. And I will take the loaf and put it in my knapsack and come home. This will happen even now without Madame. Why wouldn't it? How will you pay? A ration ticket. Do we have any of those? In the drawer downstairs. And you have money, don't you? Yes, we have some money. How will you come back home? Straight back. By which route? 9 storm drains down the Rue Robert-Surcouf, right on the Rue des Tres, 16 drains back to the Rue Vaudreuil. I know it all, Uncle. I have it memorized. I've been to the bakery 300 times. You mustn't go anywhere else. You mustn't go to the beaches. I'll come directly back. You promise? I promise. Then go, Marie Laure. Go like the wind. East. They ride in boxcars through Lodz, Warsaw, Brest. For miles, out the open door, Werner sees no signs of humans save the occasional rail car capsized beside the tracks, twisted and scarred by some kind of explosion. Soldiers clamber on and off, lean, pale, each carrying a pack, rifle, and steel helmet. They sleep despite noise, despite cold, despite hunger, as though desperate to stay removed from the waking world for as long as possible. Rows of pines divide endless metal-colored plains. The day is sunless. Newman, too, wakes and urinates out the door and takes the pillbox from his coat and swallows 2 or 3 more tablets. Russia, he says, though now he has marked the transition. Werner cannot guess. The air smells of steel. At dusk, the train stops, and Newman, too, leads Werner on foot through rows of ruined houses, beams and bricks lying in charred heaps. What walls stand are lined with the black cross-hatchings of machine-gun fire. It's nearly dark when Werner is delivered to a muscle-bound captain dining alone on a sofa that consists of a wooden frame and springs. In a tin bowl in the captain's lap steams a cylinder of boiled gray meat. He studies Werner a while without saying anything, wearing a look not of disappointment, but tired amusement. Not making them any bigger, are they? No, sir. How old are you? 18, sir. The captain laughs. 12, more like. He slices off a circle of meat and chews a long time and finally reaches into his mouth with 2 fingers and flings away a string of gristle. You'll want to acquaint yourself with the equipment. See if you can do better than the last one they sent. Newman, too, leads Werner to the open back of an unwashed Opel Blitz, a cross-country 3-ton truck with a wooden shell built onto the back. Dented gasoline cans are strapped to one flank. Bullet trails have left wandering perforations down the other. The leaden dusk drains away. Newman, too, brings Werner a kerosene lantern. Gadgets are inside. Then he vanishes. No explanations. Welcome to war. Tiny moths swirl in the lantern light. Fatigue settles into every part of Werner. Is this Dr. Hauptmann's idea of a reward or a punishment? He longs to sit on the benches in Children's House again, to hear Frau Elena's songs, to feel the heat pumping off of the pot-belly stove, and the high voice of Siegfried Fischer rhapsodizing about U-boats and fighter planes, to see Jutta drawing at the far end of the table, sketching out the 1,000 windows of her imaginary city. Inside the truck box lives a smell. Clay, spilled diesel mixed with something putrid. 3 square windows reflect the lantern light. It's a radio truck. On a bench along the left wall sit a pair of grimy listening decks the size of bedpillows. A folding RF antenna that can be raised and lowered from inside. 3 headsets, a weapon rack, storage lockers, wax pencils, compasses, maps, and here, in battered cases, wait 2 of the transceivers he designed with Dr. Hauptmann. To see them all the way out here soothes him, as though he has turned and found an old friend floating beside him in the middle of the sea. He tugs the first transceiver from its case and unscrews the back plate. Its meter is cracked, several fuses are blown, and the transmitter plug is missing. He fishes for tools, a socket key, copper wire. He looks out the open door across the silent camp to where stars are spun in thousands across the sky. Do Russian tanks wait out there, training their guns on the lantern light? He remembers Herr Sadler's big walnut Philco. Stare into the wires, concentrate, assess. Eventually, a pattern will assert itself. When he next looks up, a soft glow shows behind the line of distant trees, as if something is burning out there. Dawn, a half-mile away. 2 boys with sticks slouch behind a drove of bony cattle. Werner is opening the second transceiver case when a giant appears in the back of the truck shell. Fenning. The man hangs his long arms from the top bar of the trunk canopy. He eclipses the ruined village, the fields, the rising sun. Volkheimer? One ordinary loaf. They stand in the kitchen with the curtains drawn. She still feels the exhilaration of leaving the bakery with the warm weight of the loaf in her knapsack. Etienne tears apart the bread. There. He sets a tiny paper scroll no bigger than a cowrie shell in her palm. What does it say? Numbers. Lots of them. The first 3 might be frequencies. I can't be sure. The fourth, 2300, might be an hour. Will we do it now? We'll wait until it is dark. Etienne works wires up through the house, threading them behind walls, connecting one to a bell on the 3rd floor, beneath the telephone cable, another to a second bell in the attic, and a third to the front gate. 3 times he has Marie Laure test it. She stands in the street and swings open the outer gate, and from deep inside the house come 2 faint rings. Next he builds a false back into the wardrobe, installing it on a sliding track so it can be opened from either side. At dusk they drink tea and chew the mealy, dense bread from the Ruel's bakery. When it is fully dark, Marie Laure follows her great-uncle up the stairs, through the 6th-floor room, and up the ladder into the attic. Etienne raises the heavy telescoping antenna along the line of the chimney. He flips switches, and the attic fills with a delicate crackle. Ready? He sounds like her father when he was about to say something silly. In her memory, Marie Laure hears the 2 policemen. People have been arrested for less. And Madame Manec, don't you want to be alive before you die? Yes. He clears his throat. He switches on the microphone and says, 567, 32, 3011, 2300, 110, 90, 146, 7,751. Off goed the numbers, winging out across rooftops, across the sea, flying to who knows what destinations. To England, to Paris, to the dead. He switches to a second frequency and repeats the transmission. A third. Then he shuts the whole thing off. The machine ticks as it cools. What do they mean, Uncle? I don't know. Do they translate into words? I suppose they must. They go down the ladder and clamber out through the wardrobe. No soldiers wait in the hall with guns drawn. Nothing seems different at all. A line comes back to Marie Laure from Jules Verne. Science, my lad, is made up of mistakes, but they are mistakes which it is useful to make, because they lead little by little to the truth. Etienne laughs as though to himself. Do you remember what Madame said about the boiling frog? Yes, Uncle. I wonder who was supposed to be the frog, her or the Germans? All right. And with that, another reading session coming to a close. I hope you all are enjoying the story so far. I normally don't get much responses in the comments section, but maybe this evening will be different. What do you guys think of the story so far? I know for those of you who've just joined today, there's probably a lot that you don't maybe understand. People you don't know what's going on. But for those who've been here for multiple readings, how are you liking it so far? I feel like today I did much better. I feel like I didn't stumble through quite as many words and didn't fumble as much with slurring stuff together as I do sometimes. Good. Good. Miss Deborah, you're welcome. Oh, man. All right. Well, so, I didn't do a Reader's Digest. I'm so sorry. At the beginning of readings, typically I do kind of like a condensed synopsis of what we've read so far. I am now realizing I didn't do that. I am so sorry. I will be sure to do that next week. For anyone who's new, we do... Oh no. I'm sorry your phone keeps shutting down. So we do readings twice a week. Tuesdays and Fridays, 8 to 9:30. So I will be back again this coming Tuesday, Eastern Standard Time, 8 to 9:30, and we will be continuing on with our story where we've got that much left. That much. And then we will be moving on to another book. So, all right. I hope you all have a great evening or afternoon, depending on where you're listening from. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe out there, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.